Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we help you unlock your potential freedom through land investing, real estate investing, and entrepreneurship. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today's episode discussing best land flipping niches of 2023. I'm your host, Andrew Apke, joined again by my brother and business partner, Ron Apke. Before we get into the show, let's go over a question from one of our featured Discord members. Today's question is from Paul. Paul asked, I know you can reduce tax liability by reinvesting into the business. For what's left if it gets taxed as ordinary income, correct? So state, federal, and self-employment tax.
Yeah, you got it spot on, Paul. And obviously, or not obviously, we're not accountants. So talk to your accountant if you have deeper questions about this. So how our business is looked at as an inventory business. So you buy a property for $100,000, you sell it for $200,000, you made $100,000 of profit. You cannot invest that money, that $100,000, into another deal and say that's an expense. That's not an expense; it's inventory. So that $100,000 of profit is going to be taxed as ordinary income. But yeah, you have other expenses that you can write off, whether it's sending more mail, whether it's hiring someone. Those are the expenses that you can write off, and then the remainder will be as income, essentially.
Yeah, any overhead, if you get an office space, your Wi-Fi, good things like that that are contributing to your business. Maybe you buy a CRM, systems, hire, outsource, virtual assistants, things like that are all things that help reduce that income. But yeah, I mean, if you're worried about your income level coming in, you're probably in a good financial situation. Most people coming in haven't gotten to that financial level they want. So they're like, oh, I want to make more, 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 more. And then you get to a certain point, you're like, okay, how can I drop my income down so it looks like I make less on paper, so you're getting taxed on less. But yeah, really, really good question, Paul. Let's get into the show. Today's topic, the best land flipping niches of 2023. And we're about halfway there, Ron. We're in the middle right now. It's June 2023. And we've done episodes like this before. So why have we done episodes like this before? Why are they big? Why are we big on these different niches?
Yeah, I mean, it's as the end. I mean, there's more money in niches at the end of the day. Like learning how to do something like land flipping in itself is a niche. That's why people are making so much money in land and land flipping. And then within land flipping, you have these different niches where it's just a specialization at the end of the day, and you can make more money if you become really specialized. Again, we never tell people like, okay, your first deal should be a subdivide, your first deal should be an whatever entitlement, whatever it is. That's not what we suggest doing. But that being said, as our community grows bigger, like we've only been land investing online's only been a thing 18 months. We've been flipping land for years, but we started teaching this 18 months ago. And as these first students are, some of them made seven, 800, $1 million last year, the last 12 months. And like they're interested in getting in these niches. So I think there's a lot of value in that. And they've learned so much over the last 12 months, 18 months doing land. They're ready for those next steps, which might be less deals, more profit per deal, niches kind of things.
And if you're newer starting out, and yeah, maybe you're not looking for niche now, but sometimes you just fall into different niches as well. And I think that's good to know. And it's also good to know direction of where you're actually going and keep your mind on different niches. There's a lot to get into with niches. There's just so many different opportunities out there. I saw someone post yesterday, Ron, in the community. They posted like someone posted a wet deal. Like it was like 60% water and maybe like a pond, but someone responded and said, "Yeah, I specialize in wetlands and water properties." I was like, "Interesting. Wonder what." Like, I tried to put myself in their shoes. Like, what are they? Maybe it's hunting. Honestly, it could be good hunting land, Ron.
Yeah.
Water, wet properties. So I'm just curious to how they go about that. But that's a niche among many other things. But let's throw some different niches out there. But before we do that, why you mentioned the money thing, Ron. Is there any other reason that comes to mind, like why niches are can be really powerful? The one thing that comes to mind for me is anything you get better at that's hard to get into becomes more sustainable,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So you can't just have a competitor from the streets being like, "Oh, I want to get into this," where it's super easy to get into. But like if you're talking about entitlements, Ron, and really specific different niches, rezoning and prepping it for mobile home, that's a lot of work that's a lot of specialty that you need local boots on the ground. You need good resources around. You need money to get, you know what I mean? It's just the more specialized you get, the harder it is to infiltrate.
Yeah, I think the larger the barrier to entry, um, the more sustainable, like you said, Dan. Like if education is a huge barrier to entry, like lots of education, lots of experience doing this, it's going to be more difficult for people to, like you said, penetrate, be in the market. It's going to be more sustainable for you. A lot of these type of niches, which I really like, are relationship based, whether you need a surveyor in the area, a good realtor in the area, like entitlements, you're going to have to know the cities, you're going to have to know all these different municipalities and stuff like that. A lot of it's relationship based, and those relationships are built over time. But like you said, I think along with increased money, I think it can be increased money with less hours and it's more sustainable.
Absolutely. Well, let's start throwing some niches out there because people, I want to get people's heads kind of flowing to what different
Mhm.
land niches. Like Ron said, land flipping is already a niche, but there's so many niches, even from a location aspect. Maybe you only do deals around, let's just say Portland, Oregon, Ron. Maybe you're a specialist in Portland, Oregon that's doing, 5 acre mobile home lots or whatever that is. Let's talk about different niches out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one that comes to my head and the thing that people attack the most first is subdividing. It's probably the most attainable, but again, it's a lot of relationship based stuff because you're gonna need to understand the county's zoning, all that. You're gonna also need to have a reliable realtor as well as surveyor. And when I say subdivide, guys, there is a large subdivision play where you turn 50 acres into 50 house lots, buildable lots, but you also have an option with 50 acres to turn it into 10 5-acre lots. 25 and 25 is probably big. 12 4-acre lots, whatever it is. So that's what I'm kind of talking about. Like minor subdivisions is a simple but complicated, I think, first step, because I don't, like I said, I don't want people doing this on their first deal. But you could definitely fall into a deal or two that turns into a minor subdivision.
Yeah, and I mean, major subdivisions, there's much more money in it. Just becomes, like we said, more risk, but more you need to have being more knowledgeable in that area and really, really know what you're doing from an engineering standpoint, drainage standpoint. You need engineers out there, all kinds of different things going to major subdivisions. There's a ton of money in it as well. It just becomes very specialized. The easier way, like Ron's saying, the minor subdivisions is taking that 50 acres, 10 5-acre lots, something like that, Ron.
Mhm.
But what else do you hear?
Like we talked about, like entitlements, it's not something that we've messed with. But rezoning stuff, especially as you get close to urban areas, is extremely difficult. It's extremely time consuming. A lot of times, it's going to turn into selling a commercial property. It's going to be turning a residential into a commercial, whatever it is, and selling that property to a big investor or something like that. And these deals can sometimes take 2.5, 3 years, because you're dealing with so many codes, cities, just changes that need to happen that take time. But again, these can be seven-figure profit deals, Dan.
Yeah, if you're talking the real like entitlements, there's a ton of money in there. You can get to some like lower profit entitlement deals too in certain areas. It just really depends the area you're in and the market you're in, of course. Another one out there, Ron, is some people I've seen quite a few people with this one, Ron, just hunting and recreational land
Mm.
and like leasing to hunters, things like that, or just specializing in landlocked properties for hunters and they just get there through a four-wheeler on ground, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much desirability right now. I'm in a lot of these forums on Facebook because trying to sell land, like I would join these little groups, buy and sell groups, and like there is such a there's a scarcity of hunting land, and it seems like people are like fighting over getting hunting leases. So not only are you going to get this revenue per year and this cash flow, essentially, you're also going to have that appreciating asset. So doing that, leasing that out as a long term play, I think is phenomenal.
Yeah, another one that comes to mind is infill lots in fairly populated areas like cities. Infill lots in cities can be a good niche. It's hard. You got to specialize in that area a lot of times, but there's a lot of money to be made in those. I mean, you're talking these some of these lots around are going for 500,000 to a million that are like quarter acre lots. If they're zoned in the like say they're zoned commercial in a downtown area, they're just super 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 expensive and you can make a lot of money as well.
Yeah, and a lot of those like commercial type ones, like you're gonna have to line up an end buyer. It's gonna be a lot more specialized in terms of selling the land because you need to know what it can be zoned for. Once you get closer to urban areas, like you're in main cities, like the zoning is a huge aspect, and you got to know that up front. But if you're talking about these residential infill lots, these lots are selling like, you gotta know the area, so that's where kind of the niche aspect comes in, because it's pricing becomes a niche in itself because you need to price these correctly. Neighborhood to neighborhood infill lots are gonna change, and they can change by 50% of the value, like, it can be so drastic from neighborhood to neighborhood, so knowing those areas really detailed, I like that one a lot because it's more location focused, it's extremely specialized, and, it's, it's just a lot harder for people to penetrate in.
I agree, and, I'm trying to think of some others, Ron, my mi I we talked about hunting, we talked about subdividing. What else is there?
I mean, we talked about hunting. Farming is similar to
Farming.
that in terms of farm leases, stuff like that. These people take care of your land. Like if you get a good farm lease, something like that, like these can be long term leases. They're going to take very good care of your land. They're going to take pride in it. A lot of times they'll pay the taxes as well. So you really have no expenses I mean, there are no expenses for you. That's one that a lot of wealthy people are putting into long term play is farmland, and just land is not going anywhere. Like land is there's a limited amount of land. So if you hold land long enough, like and you're cash flowing every year, it's an extremely good way to diversify your portfolio, as well as have that cash flow.
A really niche one I've seen, Ron, which is I've seen actually two different occasions people looking for this. Wasn't anyone in our community, it was someone looking to buy very specific land from us, and they were asking me questions when I used to sell our properties. It was properties with water features and specifically waterfall on it and they would take it
Interesting.
and then sell it to like campgrounds and different adventure type of places as well. They were looking for like small waterfall featured, and I think it was up in like North Georgia specifically, Ron. But that was one I've seen multiple times that is very odd to think about, but it's
Yeah, I
out
mean,
there.
if you learn about, I like that. That's such a specific thing. It's such not a weird question, but it's just like such a specific thing that they're looking for, and they're trying to get it at a good deal, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, there's hundreds of niches that you can get within this, guys. Like there's stuff we haven't even talked about. I mean, improvements, Dan, are something that we should probably talk about a little bit, whether you're clearing the land, whether you're putting a driveway, whether you're putting a
That's a big one.
septic well, mobile, something to make the end buyer it easier for the end buyer, it cheaper for the end buyer. If you're doing that, it's going to be a ton of improve or a ton of added value.
That's a really big one. We do a lot of improvements. There's a lot of good value there. Is it a niche? Yeah, I think in a way, especially if you start getting into different like septic perk tests, things like that. Especially if you have small land, like the perk test on small properties. I feel like in these just minor improvements, maybe like you have an engineer, write up or draft a document showing where the building's going to go and some of the other features where septic's going to go, things like that. Like these minor improvements, clearing out some area, clearing out a road, putting a road in, whatever it is. Improvements are really, really good. Another one that we don't talk about a lot. That's one of the biggest niches in the whole land niches in the whole world is mineral rights. And we don't get into that a lot, but mineral rights are, I mean, that is a massive industry in the oil industry, Ron, and also just, different industries along. Like in Pennsylvania, this is big. Also in the South, you have all the oil leases as well and all the mineral rights, subsurface. Subsurface rights is just such a massive industry, Ron.
Yeah. So essentially, initially, when a property would so when you sell a property, if you have mineral rights and surface rights, you could theoretically just sell the mineral rights, and that's how those two event got separated at one point. A lot of pieces of parcel land in the country will still have rights attached to the surface rights. But that being said, like you get into Texas, you get into Oklahoma, Colorado with big oil industries, and there's a lot of value in the subsurface rights. I don't know enough about this to say like we just don't. Maybe you do know more than me, Dan, about it, but I'm not as educated on this as maybe I should be. But I know like this is a massive industry. Oil rights. It's essentially oil rights, is what it is.
And a lot of land investors do not know about this at all in terms of just like educate. 'Cause we don't know much because there's so many. Each state has different guidelines with mineral rights, and you can get into so much. There's so much. It's very, very, very technical, which makes it a really cool niche to think about. And these oil industries are going after these properties. Like if you guys have ever seen the title landman, like someone working as a landman, that's their title at a company. It's where they're literally just trying to acquire like and analyze subsurface rights to buy for these big oil companies. BP has thousands of landmen around trying to find these different areas and properties to where they can drill or whatever on the properties. And this is such a big niche. I would love to know more about it, but it is a rabbit hole. There's a lot. Each state's different, each area in the state's different, different regulations, different, mineral right deeds. There's a lot that goes into this. And then actually what's subsurface, like how are you actually going to get there? There's different methods of extraction and different laws with extraction, Ron. So there's all kinds of things with this, but it is a cool niche where I'm sure you can make a boatload.
Yeah, without a doubt, and, like I said, I'm not overly educated on it by any means, and it because it's like an industry in itself. Like it's almost like beyond like just the land niche, like because it is
I
a
agree.
it's like because it's like in the oil industry is essentially what it is. It almost comes outside of land. Like you got to know what it is, so you're not buying property where you don't have mineral rights and someone else has mineral rights and they're going to do stuff on your land. So you got to be careful with that and be educated on that aspect of things. But I think you kind of brought up a good point, Dan. Like with any of these niches, like you got to know local laws. You gotta before you start an improvement or whatever it is on land, like you got to understand what you can do with the land. Subdividing is a huge thing in terms of knowing what you actually are allowed to do. Know the regulations in the city, the county, everything like that. But I think that's really good.
Any niches that you'd stay away from just off that we've talked about or that's in your head?
Probably like adding structures, honestly. Like that just becomes, especially right now in today's market where holding costs are more expensive. It's harder to sell property. Mobile homes take forever to put on a piece of land. I don't like the building industry, seems maybe like modular stuff like that, but the building industry, I would not do.
Yeah, it just becomes a whole nother. I mean, at that point, you're not a land company. You're really a builder. If you're putting structures on a property, prepping it for property is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Whether you're putting a pad down or just your septic, like we talked about, prepping for building to make it easier on everyone is a cool niche as well. So they don't need to worry about, oh, right when I buy this land, I got to get this permit. I got to do this. Oh, all permits already in place. Oh,
Yeah.
there's already a septic system on there. There's a well on there. Everything's in place. You just got to build.
That's what I was kind of thinking when we were talking, Dan, is like that being a huge niche in like mountainous environments. It's got to be expensive areas because how much but like prepping land in extreme sloped areas where there's million, $2 million houses could be an extremely profitable niche. It is extremely expensive to prep these pieces of land for houses, but I was just kind of thinking because we had that deal that we reviewed where it was like you had to cut into a mountain and it was already done before we were under contract to buy it. But that I could imagine. I think it would be pretty easy to acquire the land also.
What do you mean by that? Just because it's
Just
higher risk?
prepping sloped land, like extremely sloped land for expensive mansions or houses, whatever it is. Which is you get into excavating, you get into cutting out of mountains. Like it's an
Well,
extremely expensive process after, and that's one of the bigger niches that we've talked about in terms of skill set.
yeah, and it's gonna help sell the property faster, but not only that, like, it's gonna help it get under contract faster, and the closing process is gonna be faster because these people putting $2 million homes on these mountain properties with a beautiful view of the Colorado mountains, Ron, they're not going to buy a property where they don't know if they can't build. They're gonna want the test done. They're gonna want an engineer to look at it to make sure they can put their dream home on it. They're just gonna want a lot of things aligned when you start getting to that price range, Ron. So that's why I think having some of those permits and everything ready for them to go is going to speed that all up because then they're going to get it. You're going to get it under contract and they're going to want 90 days to do these different tests and things.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you know a market there and have the connection, not just there, anywhere, with those that kind of meet those guidelines, like I think that can be that's one of the more skilled things I think in terms of prepping really sloped land, because it is risky. I think because how expensive it can get.
As always, thank you for joining. Please do us a huge favor and like and subscribe our YouTube channel and share this with a friend. It really means the world to Ron and I, but more importantly, it could help change the life of someone else. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next episode.